pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will read our mission statement. The Danvers Public Schools is a dynamic community of independent learners dedicated to respect, responsibility, creativity, and the pursuit of academic and personal excellence. This meeting is being broadcast on Danvers Community Access Television, and I'd like to ask if anyone else in the audience is recording these proceedings. I see Mark Zubrick's hand up. Anyone else? No. Okay. So with that, items of interest to the superintendent, school committee, and community. To our acting superintendents.
I'm all set this evening. Thank you.
All set? All right. Any items of interest from the school committee members?
I'll just provide an update. The students found out last week that those that are unvaccinated will be able to participate in the DECA
Oh,
event
good.
in Boston.
Excellent. All right, now for items of interest to the public, we'll be taking comment when we talk about the masking and the COVID statistics. So for this particular part of the evening, I'm going to ask if someone has an item of interest to the community or from the community, but not related to masking. If anyone has something not related to masking, feel free to speak now. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zubrick.
Mark Zubrick. What I would like to do is, and I don't do this very often, but I like to compliment the temporary superintendents for expanding the agenda. I thought it was this time and last time it was much, much better than we discussed in August. And I appreciate that, but I think we need more information on the agenda to be attached so the public at least knows what are we going to talk about. We need more information on the agenda items that you're proposing because we're sitting here dumb, fat, and happy, and we don't know what you're talking about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Sure. If you would just tell us who you are.
Sure.
And
My name is Dee Dee Sciano, and I'm from the North Shore NAACP, and I just wanted to read a statement. Good evening. My name is Dee Dee Sciano, and I'm an executive member of the NAACP's North Shore branch. As some of you may know, we have created a Danvers ad hoc committee with many members, Danvers members, to clearly understand and address the multitude of incidents that have occurred over the past 2 years. We're a working partnership with the ADL regarding Danvers, and we've consulted with the Attorney General's office since they began their investigation in the civil matter regarding Danvers School District. While the AG's office does not formally partner with any third party, we've agreed to share the work we do in Danvers with their office. Our branch remains committed to the advancement of a safe and equitable community in the Danvers schools for all students and families. The North Shore NAACP branch wants to clearly understand how we got here and to make sense of it, supporting the Danvers community who currently stands for equity. Our objective is to improve the culture and climate in Danvers and figure out how we can be helpful to ultimately bring healing and understanding with what truly happened. Our first steps in this endeavor are establishing relationships with the Danvers school staff, partnering and getting to know the leaders in the Danvers school community. We don't have a pre-scripted dialogue. Our plan is to ask about roles, responsibilities, and accountability within the Danvers school system. The North Shore NAACP branch seeks the following outcomes: to have candid discussions between both school committee members and district administration with our branch. The establishment of a close and that was one. Two, the establishment of a close and effective working relationship between the district and the forthcoming town DEI director. 3, satisfactory resolution of issues raised by incidents of the last 2 years. And 4, consistent and long-term advancement of a positive, culturally responsive learning environment for all students and families, as well as the capacity of internal leaders and educators to maintain the environment and accountability for nurturing it. Once these outcomes are established, we will continue to monitor progress of these goals and update the school committee and the public at these meetings. We look forward to working with you and to ultimately share in this learning and growth process. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are currently working on, as you probably know, setting up meetings with the representatives of the NAACP for just some of the purposes you're talking about. So thank you. Anyone else? Sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. Guy Norio. I have a fourth grader over at Highlands. And wanted to talk about a company called Primary Source and what these people do, how it was vetted from the town, where did the idea come from, who paid for it, who was the group that approved the funding, you know, the history of this company. I took a look at their website, pretty interesting stuff. 55 partner districts throughout the whole state of Massachusetts, not a lot. 25% of the student population in Massachusetts, not a lot. 120,000 students study this type of curriculum. And on top of that, out of 120,000 students that are on this curriculum, there was only 225,000 views of this entire page. I understand that this is a very big issue, and I think it should be addressed. My issues with this is that it's being addressed to elementary school children. I don't have any knowledge of middle school. I think this is something that could be addressed at the high school level when people are a little bit more educated, when the children can actually grasp the concepts that need to be taught. Personal experience, asking my son how everything's going, what are they learning, he just doesn't get it. These kids are too young. And there's a lot of questions that go on, and me being an active parent, you know, I want to ask those questions. I want to see what they're learning. I want to know what they're doing, and the concepts that they're grasping are, it's a complete waste of time, in my opinion, for the elementary school children. High school, like I said, again, I compliment the teachers. It's not their issue. And when it comes to, you know, the situation that we've had in Danvers, though very unfortunate, I don't know if the town is looking to check a box just to say that they're doing something, or if they're really wanting to educate the students on these matters. So, like I said, at the high school level, I'm not an educator, but I think that's appropriate. But I would rethink that and also go through with the vetting process of this company, what it stands for. Some of the reading is a bit explicit for the younger kids. So I would just caution to see if any of individuals up here have read through all those books and went through the elementary school books and could say that, yes, most of these children could understand what these important points are. I just don't see 7 to 10-year-old really grasping these concepts. So thank you for hearing this, and I hope we see some change.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so do we have our student representative here yet?
That's why we don't. Not yet.
Yes, not yet, okay. We'll
She's
move.
on her way.
All right, thank you. So, COVID statistics and next steps. Keith?
So we'll begin by going through our monthly, or in this case, 3-week slideshow of data. I would like to point out again that you're going to see it in 1-week increments. So this is our updated dashboard that we talked about last month. So you'll see for January 20th to the 26th that there was 73 cases in children. So we did start to report total cases out. I'll say 54 of those were in the school setting. 76% of the town was partially or fully vaccinated, with an almost 16% positivity rate. On the next slide, you'll see the cases dropped to 23. 13 of those were in the school setting. The vaccination rate stayed the same, as well as having 12% positivity rate that week. And I do just want to highlight the difference in the data. So the data on the bottom half of the screen is from the town of Danvers and is updated on Fridays. The top part of the screen is where we talk about being Thursday to Wednesday to match the DESE reporting cycle. And you'll also see the 7-day trend. So it was decreasing. And so this is updated so that the community can look at any 7-day increment that they would like to see, or over different periods of time. So we go to our last week, you'll see the cases are increasing, but only slightly, with 26 cases. There was 12 cases in the school setting. 77% vaccination rate, so vaccination rates were up slightly, with an 8.86% positivity rate. So similar to the town, we continue to see a positive, or a trend that we would like to see in our COVID statistics as cases continue to drop. If we go to our vaccination rates, again, looking at them in snapshots of time between meetings, so on 1/20/22, you'll see that there was approximately 61% of students in Danvers 12 to 15, and 69% 16 to 19, and our 5 to 11-year-olds at about 41%. If we go to the next slide on 2/10, our 5 to 11-year-olds are up slightly, with the rates for 12 to 15-year-olds and 16 to 19-year-olds steady at that same, and slightly behind what the Massachusetts state average is. Again, we've talked about a lot under the old rules from DESE about the vaccine thresholds, and how to meet that 80% needed to be based on local data collection. So you'll see we continue to track that information. The rates are up, especially at our elementary schools over the past month, and our high school and middle schools stay relatively stable. The data would show from the town-wide data that we actually have more people vaccinated than is indicated in the local data collection, but again, we're only voluntarily collecting that information from families who are willing to share. So last week, we were able to share a survey with what the recommendation from families is for the decision that we have before us tonight, based on the mask mandate being lifted. You'll see that almost 74% of families voted for masks to become optional as of the 28th. 21% voted for them to stay mandatory, and then the difference, that small slice, was the other box where people got to choose what they might like as their custom option. A lot of that included either no masks at all from families, or included waiting 2 weeks after February vacation, or waiting until after April vacation, or some variant of removing masks at a little bit of a later time. We sent the same exact survey out to our staff as well. You'll see slightly different results, but very similar. Again, 66% voting for mask optional, 23% voting for masks being required, and then a whole bunch of other options, and I'll say these were more around, again, looking at a different date and time, or about setting up metrics for when masks would need to go back on, and listing some of that custom information in that other box. I would say we also received probably close to 400 comments, I think, from families, and about 100 comments from staff members that were shared with the school committee, that again all echoed that similar sentiment of either following the science that is saying now that masks should be optional or what other people's, information that they were basing their decision off of. So we thank the families for sharing that information, and it was something that Mary and I each spent time over the weekend reviewing and that we were able to share with school committee as we came into tonight. And we would like to also compliment the high response rate from everybody in the survey. So we will, tonight, administration, Mary and I are recommending that we do go to follow the guidance as presented by DESE, which will be masks being optional as of February 28th. Some points to highlight is if students do test positive and they return in that 6 to 10 day range, DESE is not making that mandatory, but it is truly highly recommended. So you will hear from our school nurses that that is a very highly recommended piece that we would like them to follow. Masks will be required in our school health offices. That is not an option. We'll have boxes outside of the school health offices, and masks will be required on school transportation, and that's per a federal order. So those are beyond our local control. That's not something that we're looking to make a recommendation on. The masking in days 6 to 10 is a recommendation that we're making locally. And then we're going to continue a lot of our other mitigation strategies. So some of our cohorting and, keeping really kids in pods has been successful, and that is what has helped our school spread stay low. So again, we are going to continue that with our staff and our teachers to continue those mitigation strategies. It means kids are working in pods of 4. They might be sitting 4 or 6 to a table at lunch. It doesn't mean that they're sitting in isolation, or that they're sitting on their own, or that they're 6 feet apart. It just means that they might be 3 feet apart rather than going back to full capacity. So that is where we've had success to help keep the spread low, so we are looking at continuing that. And we do want to highlight that really masks are still allowed for families who choose to wear them and for children and staff who choose to wear them. And we will be working really hard on creating a culture where that individual choice is respected. And we are asking all of our families to support us in that work and talking to their children, because this is a family choice. That's what people have been advocating from the beginning, is that they want their individual families to be able to make that decision. So we are agreeing that now is the time for that choice to be able to be made, but that means they also need to support families and staff members who are choosing to still wear a mask. And that is something that, we're very serious about. And as we've talked about throughout the year, we're really trying to create cultures where everybody belongs on all fronts, and this is an important part, and we're not, we don't want to lead to kids feeling like they're being singled out because they're wearing a mask, and our administration will be talking with kids who do choose to say things to other kids that are wearing masks and really working hard on that culture, because that is an incredibly important part of what we're trying to do this school year. So that's all we have for our presentation. I think now we were hoping that the school committee would be able to provide some feedback to us on our recommendation for this evening.
All right. I do want to give a little bit of context to this, in that the mask mandate was not something that, as a school committee, we put in place. That was put in place by the governor, or the DESE. So right now, as of the 28th, we won't have a mask mandate in place. The only thing, how do I put this? The only vote that would be necessary tonight is if someone wants to move to continue any sort of a mask mandate. Other than that, we don't actually have to take a vote. It'll expire of its own time, and we just move on. But I do want to go right now to comments from the school committee, generally in terms of the recommendation and kind of where you're at, and then we'll go to public comment as necessary. So Jeff, why don't we start?
Sure. I agree with the recommendation. A lot of the reasons have been listed. I think the last point that Keith highlighted is the most important. There are going to be teachers that continue to wear masks. There are going to be staff that continue to wear. There are going to be students for a variety of reasons. And so that is important for all of us to recognize and to understand and support. So, I'm not going to go into a lot of the details as to what's been listed here, but I do support the guidance to have masking optional.
All right, thank you. Robin?
Yeah, I don't have any, well, I have a couple questions. So there was a little bit of a confusion. Does it start on the 28th or does it start on March 1st? I know that was a big question people had. Mr. Traverna?
Do we have an answer to that, Keith?
I would have to get clarification.
Okay.
My understanding is that it expires on the 28th.
Right, like the day we come back?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that. Will we still have masks available for anyone who may want them? I know the nurses had asked about that.
Yes, we'll have ample masks. Again, we'll put tables outside of the nurse's office for that, as well as giving them to all of our bus drivers and van drivers, to our athletic teams, because again, that requires bus transportation. So our athletic teams will be required to wear them when they go on buses, so we'll have plenty of masks. And again, specifically for our staff, as we have for the entire year, we'll be providing them with whatever PPE that they request, as we've been doing since September.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy about the mitigation strategies. The only other question I would have is that it's recommended, I know like we talked about this in August too, it was recommended that the kids under 5 wear masks. Now it's saying highly recommended for unvaccinated and for kids 6 to 10 after positive cases. So 6 to 10 days after positive cases, are we as a school committee, I think that's something to consider, are we saying we're recommending that, or are we saying that we're mandating that? I think that's just important to clarify within
So
us.
I think I would just advocate for, if we were going to take a vote or clarify that we would be in support of taking a stance on children that are coming back after testing positive in days to 6 to 10, but as an administration, that I would have hesitation towards mandating it for students who are unvaccinated, because we're not looking to draw that distinction between kids in the school building, and think it's really important to be inclusive, that we don't go down that road for the unvaccinated portion if we're going to follow this recommendation to go to optional.
Right, so the 6 to 10.
The 6 to
days
10
after
day
is really the
piece
big
is.
Okay,
but-
and then I just think it's something to consider too. Like last year, there was like that whole matrix thing the governor had with the cases, and I just think, we know that in the last 2 years, we've learned a lot about science. I think to continue to be proactive, that if there does continue to be if there happens to be a huge uptick in cases, I just think that's something that we, as a committee, would need to review. If it happens before future meetings, we just need to kind of, I think, get ahead of that and then talk about different mitigation strategies possibly. So just keeping that out there. But I'm supportive of the DESI's guidance on masking. So.
Thank you, Robin. Alice?
I'm in support of following DESI's recommendation, and as the only parent on this board, I am thrilled that my daughter is going to be able to go to school for the first time and have a normal day. In all honesty, we've been waiting such a long time for this, and I know it wasn't our own mandate, it was the state, it was the government, whoever. It's just gonna be a sigh of relief on February 28th to send my kids off. Well, they have to wear a mask on the bus, but if I drop them off at school that day, which I probably will, because I wanna see them walk into that school without a mask, so I'm happy and thrilled, and I have no other questions.
Mr. Skarmas?
So I agree 100%. And I also agree 100% with Keith that you can't make any type of a recommendation. You can't follow anything relative to vaccinated or unvaccinated. So we can't be doing that. I'm a parent, but my kids are older. But if they were younger, I'd say exactly what you said. So 100% agreed. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I am actually on the same page. I've had the chance to talk with Dee from the Board of Health, and he is, of course, clued into the medical piece too, and he mentioned that within the last, say, 10 days to 2 weeks, the number of COVID patients at North Shore Medical Center dropped from over 100 down to about 17, none of whom are in the ICU. They are considering doing elective surgeries again. It does appear that we are past the Omicron issue, providing that there's no other variant that pops up. Right now, we're in really good shape. And I did hear, it's funny, I heard a doctor talking today, and he said health professionals who are like solely looking at the public health piece would probably be more conservative. And you do hear some people saying, look, let's delay this a little more. But he pointed out that he was talking about governors, but I think it applies to anyone who's in government. We have to look at not only the notion of physical health, but the economy and the social needs of the town. And it's pretty clear at this point that the balance that we needed masks all the time to prevent the spread is now outweighed by the potential harm emotionally that some students are feeling because of having to wear masks. And we always said that we would follow, or tried to follow, the recommendations from DESE. So I think if there's a time to do it, that time is now. And so I support following DESE again, and that means the mandate will expire on the 28th here in Danvers, unless someone's going to bring a counter motion, and I don't think so. So it looks like, we'll go to the DESE recommendation as of February 28th.
Thank you.
I would like to emphasize what Keith was talking about. Please talk to your students about avoiding any sort of remarks or any sort of treating people differently because they're wearing masks. You have essentially, those of you who have been vocal and signing petitions and appearing before the Board of Health and here, you have asked for freedom to do what you feel is right for your students. And we need to extend that freedom and courtesy to people who feel differently and still want their kids to mask. So this would probably be a good time to have a discussion about with your student, let them know you're happy about the mask mandate, but let them know they're still going to see staff and students wearing masks, and that they should be supportive or just don't say anything. Just treat everybody the way you'd want to be treated. And that's a good lesson for our students all the time anyway. But as parents, I hope you'll help us drive that home. So we appreciate that. Now, we do have very few people who have signed up to speak. And again, this would be on the masking issue only. Dee Dee Ciano? You already spoke. Okay, so you were, got it, okay. Sophia Hockdor?
Hi, I'm Sophia Hochter. I'm an 8th grader from Halton Richmond Middle School. I had a speech to be prepared to make mask optional, but I want to say thank you from the students not to not have Danvers have to wear. Basically, I just wanted to say thank you because it's been a hard 2 years of not having to wear masks, and I'm really just grateful to have this opportunity to have masks optional. So I think it's going to make kids more mentally happy, and I just want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Cummings.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. And thank you for following the science that you've been telling everyone to follow for 2 years. One thing I did want to mention is you keep mentioning being inclusive of those who choose to wear a mask, but that goes both ways.
Absolutely.
So people who choose not to wear a mask need to be treated with equal respect. They should not be treated as dirty, and students should just be respectful of each other, and that's it. That's all there is to it. But, with your messaging, I suggest changing that to all students should
I
respect
agree with you
everyone's
totally.
choice.
That didn't come across. Everybody should be treating everybody the way they want to be treated, absolutely.
Exactly. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, and Sarah Skinner. Hi, Sarah.
I'm not much for public speaking, but hearing you guys still kind of tying masking a little bit to metrics and stuff just made me want to go ahead and make a little statement anyway. I would offer a suggestion that not only we lift it, but not reimpose it. As a person who, when the pandemic first started, I read the World Health Organization in 2019 had put out sort of a meta-analysis of tons of research that was called Pandemic Guidelines for the next time there was a pandemic. And in that document, it says that masking, while sort of plausible, it was mechanistically plausible, it seemed like it would work, it hadn't been shown to work in real-world studies and data and real-world numbers. And so then I felt sort of gaslit when we all went ahead and did it anyway for 2 years, and I thought, that's so weird. We have all this data to show that it's not really helpful. I want to help, I want to do something that's helpful, but this feels really performative. And then I watched people do all sorts of weird things, like cut holes in their masks to play their trumpets, and to pull down their masks every time we couldn't understand each other, which was all the time, right? I mean, I have a daughter with a speech delay. It's been terrible for her self-esteem to be not understood, to have to go through speech therapy with her therapist wearing a mask. She's supposed to wear a mask. People can't understand her, and she feels badly about herself. And then when we feel like it's just cosplay, because early in the pandemic, we could cherry pick and we could say, okay, well, look at this 1 week of data from this school or from this state or from this country, and they did so much better, and it had to be because they did this thing. But 2 years later, that's not a responsible way to handle the data. We're looking at, if you factor in seasonality and demographics, we're getting the same results whether we're masking or not. And a lot of European countries never implemented mask mandates that affected students, right? We're talking the UK, Scandinavia, Netherlands, Switzerland, France, even Italy, did not have mandates affecting children, and their school transmission is not different. So I guess as a person who has tried to speak out against mandates and the detrimental effect that I feel they're having on children and adults, by the way, I get worried because we get accused of having pandemic fatigue or not being willing to do the right thing, and I just want to offer a voice that I think we all want to do the right thing, but we may disagree reasonably about what that is and what that looks like. And let's look at the big picture of the data. And if it's not helpful, I know it takes humility and there's like that sunk cost fallacy in play, but let's be humble enough to be willing to redirect and say, maybe this didn't work. And like I said, as a person who read a lot of data early in the pandemic and thought, it doesn't seem like this is helpful on a large scale basis. The gaslighting is unreal. To do it for 2 years and then finally read in the mainstream media, maybe it all did nothing all along. But people were trying to say that and we didn't listen to them. So I think we could do a better job listening and trying to not politicize things like this and listening to both sides and understanding that science isn't a decided thing, it's a method, right? I mean, students are learning this in school and we as adults have maybe not set a great example for them of what that looks like. So I guess finally I just wanted to say that we've put a big burden on children. For the first time in my awareness, we've told them that they're responsible to take care of older people. You guys, it's my job as a mom to take care of my kids. It's our job as adults to care for young people. And I'm so grateful that we're gonna go with DESE and lift this mandate. But I'll never forget that it wasn't struggling families, crying children, developmental delays, children struggling, suicides, an absolute mental health crisis. It wasn't that did it. It was the polls. And it should have been the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on with our agenda? Sure.
I'm Caitlin Monahan. I know I'm in the minority here, and I just, like I thanked the Board of Health earlier this week for following the science before. I thanked them for following the science now when they lifted the mask mandate. I understand that there are two sides to every story. Hours after that mask mandate was lifted, I went into a store to buy a Valentine's present for my kids. And the store had just opened, and I went in, and the owner of the store literally reached out to touch my face and take my mask off and tell me that I don't need to wear this anymore, when it was my choice. So I'm begging of everyone to be respectful of both sides. Both sides. I get it. My kids, we talk about it all the time. We all have there's reasons for what we do. And for people who are still wearing masks, we have lived through the mental health crisis as well. Our children are very affected by it as well, no matter what we believe. But I am very curious on what we're going to be doing to make sure that all sides are being respected. Because I already lost my faith in this one person. So I beg of everyone, remember that there are a lot of kids out there with health issues that are still out there, and if your kids are sick, please keep them home. I had a whole thing to write, and then it was violating my kids' privacy, so I chose not to, but I beg of you all, no matter what side you're on, keep your kids home if they're not well, and please respect each other. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right. Last, Mr. Zubrick for a second time.
Thank you, Eric. The one question I have is, what took you so long? Because what I've gathered from the meetings that I've attended in August, September, and November, at that time, you had an opportunity to cut this mask business off.
No.
But you decided not to because you were responding to DESE. And one question I have is, why are we so dependent on the Department of Education where we're supposed to be an independent town? And you had a lot of parents come out and petition for getting rid of the masks a while back. And the thing is, why can't we make this thing go away tomorrow? So that's my big question. The question is, why are we so dependent on the direction of the Department of Education?
So the question is, Mark, why do we comply with the law?
Well,
Why do we comply with regulations?
There is no law, Eric. There
No,
is
what
a
I'm saying is,
guidance.
it's a regulation. Essentially, when DESE, through the governor, puts a mask mandate in place, just like if they say, that superintendents have to be licensed or that there will or will not be MCAS testing. There are certain things that the Department of Education in the state have the right to do. And
Well,
in this case, they were acting with the governor under the color of his emergency powers. And you have spoken before about this idea that we, somehow you stand up to the government. And that's fine. We can have a philosophical disagreement about that. But the fact is, we are doing what we believe and have always done what we feel we were legally required to do. Simple as that. And we're not interested in making, a stand just for the sake of making a stand, Mark. So we have followed the guidance and the requirements, accent on the requirements of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the governor, because they have the right to do what they're doing.
Well, I'll
And
tell
that's
you,
been tested in court. I mean, it's that simple, Mark.
I don't want to debate anything, but I just want to give you a little feedback. Every time I've asked that question, it's been told to me that it's because we depend on the funding from the state.
That's absolutely,
And
that's
that's
absolutely part
absolutely
of it.
why we're doing it.
That's
We're not an independent. Why do we need you guys all together?
Because there are certain things that DESE doesn't do. Like, this, Mark. That's the thing.
I
You
know.
want to start some sort of revolution against the big bad government down the State House. Well,
No, it's the little government here in Danvers. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Always a pleasure, Mark. Whoops, someone else? Okay, two more people.
Yeah, Jim Morose. You know, in line with what Mark was talking about, just to be, you know, I mean, it's always following the money, right? But wasn't there a process within the DESI guidelines that Danvers or any town could process a waiver to do this?
Yes, if.
And
if-
so if we processed a waiver, would we have lost our money then also?
It wasn't a waiver. The DESI guidelines indicated that if a school, staff and students could demonstrate, as Keith mentioned earlier, by local data, that more than 80% or more of the students and staff were vaccinated, then you could petition to change the mask mandate. But you had to be able to show 80% vaccination.
Okay, so, and then again, see, it just keeps bringing up the questions in the science. I mean, you know, the DESI guideline says that if someone is unvaccinated and they come down with COVID, then they should wear a mask. That's the recommendation. But we all know that people that are vaccinated twice and thrice and boosted, they're getting COVID-19 and they're transmitting COVID-19. So where is the science in that? We just made a statement here, Mr. Scanis did, that we weren't going to follow that discriminatory DESI statement that said unvaccinated only. So I just hope that's going to be in someone makes a motion or you feed that back up to DESI to say that that's, you know, what is the difference? There is no difference.
You know, that's not a bad idea to clarify. Yep, thank you.
I rest my case, thank you.
Thanks. Sir?
So hello, my name is Devin Freeman, and I guess my question is directed to Mrs. Campbell. So you alluded at the beginning of this meeting that you were able to resolve the matter with the DECA kids going into compete in Boston. I guess could you elaborate on that solution, and is this a solution that could be applied again in the future if this type of thing was to happen again?
So I'm more than happy to answer that, Eric. It wasn't, so I received an email from the DECA advisor. They were able to get someone from the mayor's office, Mayor Wu, to attend a board meeting at DECA where they were able to plead their case. So because of that, and I guess the positive momentum from towns complaining about this mandate, they were able to get an approval through the mayor's office for that specific event.
You have to go to the microphone if you're going to speak. I'm sorry, can't hear you. Okay, sure. No. In a second, Mark, I get someone who hasn't spoken yet. Yeah, go, oh, wait a minute, you have spoken. All right, we'll go with him, and then we'll go with Mark.
So just to be clear, there is no contingency plan if something should come up again. As far as a variant, as far as an uptick, you have zero.
There's no,
Say there's no plan in place right now to reinstitute
Right.
masks. If
Okay.
if the future dictates something differently, DESI changes guidance, or there's extenuating factors that we need to readdress that decision, that would be brought in front of the school committee again for discussion.
yeah.
Okay, so it will be brought in front of the school committee, and we will have ample time to have a debate like this, well, not a debate, I'm sorry, but
As much time as we get, we'll pass on to the community.
I understand,
So-
it happens quick and
Yes,
everything
yeah.
there. So there is no, I mean, it could change next week, and we're back at square one. So, okay, I guess I understand that. Just another point, you know, I think that if you want to wear a mask, wear it. You want to wear 3, wear it. People in my family wear 5. Some people want to do it, good for them. But every one of you here that has the mask on, and that's what you want to do, that's great. Know that each one of you up here, you've moved it around, you've taken it off, take a drink, you've put it back on. The mask is compromised. We know that through the science that people choose to listen to or not. So call it a false sense of security. If you want to wear it, wear it. But know that it's not going to work, and it never has, and it never will. On the back of the boxes, it says that. Okay? It's on all your masks. You've touched them, you moved them, they're compromised. Okay? The same thing for reinstituting these rules or these guidances, or whatever you want to call them, on these vaccines. They're obsolete. These vaccines were made for the first and second variant, and we know that. That's just the science. That's just the truth. So they're not going to work for the Omicron. They're not going to work for the next one that comes up, if one comes up, which I hope it does not. We know that. That's just fact. So there's going to be people that are going to wear them. Good, wear them. Just know that if you feel more comfortable doing that, there's no help, there's no protection there. Because the minute you put the finger in there and move it around, or the minute my son sneezes in it like he does every day, it's compromised. So I commend you for taking off this mandate. I hope it lasts forever. I hope we can get back to the life that we once had. But just know that false sense of security is okay to have if you want to continue to wear 1, 2, 3 masks, whether it's the paper ones or whether it's the garment ones or whatever. Let's just be truthful, let's be honest, and let's not stir any more issues moving forward.
Mark, I'm getting to feel like this is town meeting.
It is. Look at the turnout you have.
No, I mean, with you getting up so much.
No, I took a year off.
There you
It
go.
voted me out, so that's okay. But I'll be back. The issue here is the gentleman's question in regard to contingency plan. Yeah, I know what the contingency plan is. Listen to Desi. That's what the contingency plan is. This school committee needs to take a vote on this thing to cut this thing loose as of, well, right now, everybody seems to be happy with February 28th, which is fine. But let's take a vote. And you also mentioned a clarification on how these masks should be or should not be considered by these kids, because they need to tolerate each other. So I urge you to take a vote, because it's about time the school committee took a vote on something.
We don't have, come on. That's really uncalled for, but that's okay. It'll make, Mark, it'll make a good show next time you do topics of the town, I get it. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go first, and then who else had a hand up? Yes.
You could,
Go ahead, please.
Who?
Hi, my name's Amy Cangiano. Thank you for what I think is making the right decision. I just have a couple clarifications. I know you mentioned the mitigation strategies regarding social distancing or cohorts. Can you expand upon what you mean by that? So when these kids go back to school and they're unmasked, are they still going to be not encouraged to hang out with their peers, not encouraged to social interact? I'm just concerned that even though they don't have masks, they're still going to be socially isolated. And can you just clarify what you meant by the cohorts? And
So I would say that, and that I would like to draw a distinction between the mitigation strategies that were in place for the 2020-21 school year as we returned, and the mitigation strategies that have been in place for 21-22. And while I understand that masking is social isolationism to a lot of people, that we've made a concerted effort this year to have kids be in pods And so, yes, they're gonna interact with their peers, but they may be sitting with the same 4 kids at lunch that they're sitting with in the classroom, and some of those pieces may be, but when they go to recess, when they're at different parts of the building, we're gonna encourage them to be kids again. We're not gonna put kids into dedicated rows or anything like we did with formal spacing last year. It's more about pods that we're finding the balance to help mitigate any spread that there could be, but with meeting those real social needs of children to help them. Yep, when they're out at recess, they can play with whoever they want. We're not going back to rows or anything like that in the past.
Okay, who was next, please? Oh, there we go.
I just wanted to add one little thing, and thanks for giving me the time. Just hearing another gentleman talk about just kind of the ineffectiveness of it as well, which I had also spoken to. I wanted to mention that I did some time comparing a couple of countries in Europe that have mandated N95s, because I see the goalposts moving in some settings, like, well, what we just need to do is do the same things that have failed over and over for 2 years, but do them more and do them harder. Berlin and Bavaria both mandated N95s, and their cases are no different than surrounding regions. So I just want to make people aware, because I know it's easy to read the headline, and if it says, you know, Florida's really bad and the Northeast is really good in the summer, then we kind of take that to heart and we don't look at the seasonality of it and look at the big picture. So we just have to kind of zoom out, and I encourage people not to move those goalposts or to keep trying to do the same things. Children's mental health is suffering, and I just have never heard any big picture strategy be to tell them to get exercise and get fresh air and get vitamin D and eat nourishing foods. We could do those things. Those make a difference. This doesn't. So we don't mandate that people participate in cosplay, but they can do that if they want to. And we don't mandate that people wear rabbit's foots, but they can do that if they want to. But I think it's actually healthy for us to consider that if it doesn't work, let's tell kids things that do work, that help them be healthy. And actually a huge part of that is not isolating them from their peers, because they will be healthier if they have a strong sense of community.
Thank you. All right, whoop, I see one hand.
Hi, my name is Melissa Sullivan, and I just wanted to clarify the mitigation strategy again, so I understand this. Currently, my 4th grader went from 2 classrooms at Smith School to now recently, and I don't know if it's because of behavioral issues in the classroom, which I will touch upon that in a second, but they went from 2 separate classrooms to basically 12 kids in 3 separate groups. Are you saying that those 12 kids are now going to be divided up into 4 groups of 3 consisting of 4 people, or is she going to be in her group of 12 still come February 28th?
No, that will not change.
That will
We're
not change.
changing class sizes,
Okay.
we're not changing how many kids are in a room, we're not changing any of that. Everything that your kids have experienced this school year so far will continue, just without the masks.
Perfect.
So it's the same experience from September till now.
Okay, great. That would be a concern of mine, only because of all the other issues that all of you are aware of, because you've received my email and it's for no one else's ears to hear about it. But the second thing I want to bring up because of that is that we hear, and I don't know if other parents are hearing this, no matter, you know, whether you want a mask or not, there's been an increase of behavioral issues in classrooms. And I feel as though at this point, teachers are definitely not getting enough support to deal with what is happening inside the classrooms, and I think that needs to be a top priority for the school committee moving forward to help out our teachers, to help understand what these children are going through with the mental health epidemic that is happening in our schools right now. And even if you don't see it, it is happening, okay? It is happening. These kids need help, they need extra help, they're falling behind, And I feel as though that's going to be our next hurdle, especially with the school committee, is what can we do to help our teachers, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like right now, but whatever that looks like, we need to help our teachers in order to help support our students.
Thank you. During our budget presentation, you'll hear about what we're doing with some of the ESSER money that has been provided, and I think that'll cover some of what those concerns are. But yes, that is absolutely in the front of our minds. Yep. All right, anyone else, or are we done? One more.
My name is Timothy O'Keefe. I'm a Smith School parent. I have one child in second grade. Next year, my other child will be starting kindergarten there. And we're very happy with the school, for many reasons, but I've not been happy with my son being limited in who he can be friends with, who he can sit with, and being in mass. My younger son goes to private school for a pre-K in town, and he's never gone to school without a mask on his face. And I can just tell you that he is very expressive. His face, he lights up a room, but not with a mask on. He's never lit up a room with a mask on. My oldest son can tell a joke with his face. Can't see that joke when he's wearing a mask. And to have them go to school for this long and be looking to us for the answers, we don't have a clue what we're doing. We're changing every couple of weeks because the stats are manipulated. There's no way you can say anything's accurate with all these stats. So to me, I have a business in town, very customer facing, every day. I see people walk in with masks, they can wear a mask, that's fine. If they feel comfortable that way, that's their choice. And why would I ever tell them otherwise? If they don't have a mask, half the time they walk in scrambling for a mask. I look at them and say, if you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. It's your choice, you're in America. Freedom is what binds us together. If we don't have freedom, we have nothing. All right, what we have is us pointing fingers at each other, trying to decide who's right and who's wrong. Guess what, none of us are right. We're all wrong most of the time. And we're right a sliver of the time. And usually when we work together and we don't point fingers at each other. So I don't support any mandate. I don't support any mask mandate. I think that, like the woman said earlier, if the children are sick, stay home, of course. Ask my wife, if the kid has a sniffle, never mind COVID, he's staying home until we know he's healthy. Because we don't want our friends and family sick. And that's all of us. That's not because we believe in this or that. It's because we believe in each other. We don't want each other sick. And I go to work every day trying to help people. I don't care if they're wearing a mask. If they want to wear a mask, great. Now, what I don't like is that we're going to sit here and say that we should be worrying about kids making fun of each other or singling each other out for masks. What about for vaccination status? I think whatever people choose to do in their freedom of their own choice should stay at home in the freedom of their own choice and should never be broadcasted how many kids are vaccinated or not vaccinated. All it does is put someone either in the majority or the minority without knowing who and what. We all just point fingers at each other and suspect each other. And I don't think that's a society that I want to be a part of and I want my kids to be a part of. We choose to live in Massachusetts. I don't have to live here. I could take a business and go anywhere I decide where people align with freedom, because that's what I care about the most, because freedom means you get to choose your own path. And in the end, I don't think the choices that are being told that I have to do have made any difference. And I think in the end, what happens is we all end up separated from each other. I think if you want to give good advice, we should give that advice. People should work hard to give good advice and should not just carelessly throw out a recommendation and change it every 2 weeks with the changing science. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. To believe in science is, well, what is that? It changes. How can you believe in something that changes? You believe in an effort to give your best foot forward. That's what it is. And in the end, people have to make their own choices when it's all said and done. So I did want to follow up on the gentleman made the comment about last month we were here and we had a meeting and you brought up, Ms. Campbell, you brought up to our state rep, Sally Kearns was here in attendance. And you asked for help with getting the children that were unvaccinated and being banned from Boston's competition. Did she instrument any help with that?
She emailed me the next day telling me that she wasn't able to help.
But we got help, it looks like.
What?
Well, you were able to get help, though, it looks like, in the end. Was she any part of that help?
No. She
Okay.
provided a few links, but she did respond in an email the next day, and that was it.
Okay, because what also worried me last month was to have her say on record, and I asked her this question, if she supported mandating the vaccination for children to go to school. And after a long, drawn-out answer, it's a yes or no answer. Do you support it or not? She wouldn't immediately give an answer and finally said, yes, I do, and tied it to other vaccines that have been around for 50 years. This is not a vaccine that's been around for 50 years, all right? We have no data that can support either side. If someone chooses to take something, that's their choice, and I support them making their choice, because that's freedom. But in the end, I would wish you guys would steer away from segregating the children into groups, all right? You act like these kids aren't playing with each other outside of school. They're not playing football every weekend, basketball every weekend, jumping from one sport to the next in sweaty locker rooms, and then all of a sudden they go into school and they're a group of four at a table. Now they're safe and we're all safe. Come on. These kids need to know and experience each other. That's life. Otherwise, they're going to be held back and never be able to be fully functional humans, which is what we're going to end up the next crisis 10 years from now. So I just wish that everybody would encourage freedom to choose what's right for their own families and not try to dictate from above, because that never works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that concludes our public comment at this point on this issue. And we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda.
Mr. Crane, I think we're going to go back for information from our student representative.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reese's now here to
Sorry about
be able to share with us what's going on in all of our schools.
Okay, please. And welcome.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Reese. I'm a junior at Danvers High School. I just do a couple updates in school life, and a lot of them are very arts this week. So one of our a cappella groups at Danvers High School, Falcon Eyes, plays first place at ICHSA, and they competed against 7 or 8 other groups. So they'll be moving on to the semifinals in a couple weeks. And we do Drama Fest, which is a drama festival where we compete, and this year it's March 20th at St. John's Prep, and we have a preview show on March 17th, so, and I'm pretty sure it's free, and if it's not, then it's not that expensive, so I suggest you guys come see it if you're into that type of stuff, because it's very, very exciting. So that's all I have, really, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. All right, I think we are ready for information from the superintendent.
So we are happy to have Roseanne DePietro here, who is our school counsel, to give an overview of public records law, as well as really focusing on student and personnel privacy components. I was gonna say, if you don't mind, yeah, at the podium, that would be great. Do you want?
Oh, yeah, or do you want me to just move it for you? Tell me to let it go in, does it work?
It doesn't. Then you just pull, oh, now I shut off the whole screen.
Hang on a sec, please. Roseanne, give me 1 second here. What vote do you, what do you expect? You don't need, there is no mask mandate. What do you want us to vote on?
You're gonna stop
There is
touching the
right now.
technology.
Well, we're not going to end it tomorrow, Martha. Anyway, I'm sorry, Roseanne, I apologize.
We're working out a technological.
You don't mind pointing at Mary, sure.
You want, yeah.
Help you advance.
Okay. Thank you, just have to airplane it back up. I can regale you with a song while we wait. It's coming up, right? Yeah. Is it 1724? It's okay. Hold on 1 second, sorry.
There you go. The graphics weren't really that spectacular or worth waiting for, but I appreciate the effort. All right, so I'm not here to just come here and talk about privacy and public records in a vacuum. Obviously, your district and others, for that matter, have received a good amount of public records requests, and they come in through your record access officer, who is Mr. Taverna, who must have done something really bad in a past life to have that title. But so it occurs to me that this committee probably doesn't really know what goes into responding to a records request, or maybe the citizens that are here tonight or listening, you know, could benefit from maybe a little bit of a discussion about what goes into that. Because, as you know, sometimes the end product of a request for records in production, well, now that they shut the lights off at the inopportune moment, looks something like this. So people might wonder, like, what is that? Is that a public document? Well, it is, but it's gone through a process, which I want to talk to you about a little bit. So, thank you, right on cue. So the public records law is in sort of different places. There's a definition section of the law, which, if you want to torture yourself, you can go to Chapter 4, Section 7, Clause 26, which basically says, a public record is any record made or received by a public employee, official, entity, in their capacity as a public official, employee, or entity. Anything you create or receive in your private life is not a public record. If I'm a member of the public and ask Keith Taverna, please send me your personal emails you sent to your wife telling her you'd pick up the pizza on Saturday, that's not a public record. Okay, so there's the definition, but then there's 21 categories of records that are exempt. So we, in my office, joke around and say, everything that's a public record is a public record unless it isn't, under one of these 21 definitions. The exemptions or exceptions to the rule that most often come up in public schools are these. Exemption A, which says anything that's specifically or implicitly exempt by statute, which most often refers to student record information. You probably know that student information is private, it's confidential, and we have to scrub documents of personally identifiable information that would allow anybody to identify information about a student's education, a particular student. The next exemption that comes up a lot is the C exemption, which is personnel records, medical records, anything that, if disclosed, would constitute an unwarranted invasion of an individual's privacy. Employees is what we're mostly talking about here. There's also an exemption D, which is the deliberative process that oftentimes deals with litigation strategy. And then exemption F, which is investigatory materials. Okay, so exemption A, as we discussed, it talks about anything exempted implicitly or specifically. So FERPA, I don't know if you guys ever heard of FERPA, but it's the federal student record law, says that student record information is absolutely exempt from disclosure as a public record. And the mass regs follow the same principle, absolutely exempt. And so what is student record information? It's what we refer to as personally identifiable information. Not only a student's name or their family members' names, but any information that alone or in combination would be linkable to a specific student that would allow a member of the community to figure it out, like decode. If I took only the name off, but you could decode through whatever else is remaining in the document who you're talking about, you've just released or revealed personally identifiable information. And also, anybody who has made the request, if you know, as the records access officer, that this individual has a repository of knowledge that would lead him or her, if I disclosed all this stuff, would allow them to figure out who we're talking about. You have to scrub the record to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, exemption C is where things get a little bit tricky. Remember how I just said student record information is absolutely exempt from disclosure. Information under exemption C requires you to balance and figure out, like, where does the balance come out in terms of disclosing or not disclosing? Because the law says, disclosure of which may constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy. Now, the legislature has made a carve-out, an exception to the exception, if you will, that says this doesn't apply to records related to a law enforcement misconduct investigation. So anything related to an individual that ties to a law enforcement misconduct investigation is subject to disclosure. So by necessary implication, anything that doesn't fall into that is still exempt. Otherwise, the legislature would have said anything related to misconduct is free, free knowledge. I'm not going to get into the Wakefield case, but if anybody wants to look up the Wakefield case from 2000, it'll contain a discussion about personnel records and invasion of privacy. But Wakefield is useful to tell us, like, what kind of stuff is there a privacy interest in when you're talking about employees? It's anything useful in making an employment decision, meaning it's qualitative, it passes judgment, good or bad, on somebody. It's not just their payroll records. That's a public document. A collective bargaining agreement, that's a public document. Stuff like that. But if it's qualitative, an evaluation, a disciplinary record, an investigation record, that's qualitative, and that has a privacy implication to it. So you have to balance public interest versus privacy right. And you have to talk about, when you do the balancing, what's the consequence of releasing this record or this information? Does the person have an expectation that you're going to keep it private? Yeah, thank you. So when you're talking about trying to figure out whether disclosing information would be an unwarranted invasion of privacy, you have to balance the public interest in knowing versus a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's case by case, meaning every situation is different. And as you can see, I'm working up to a conclusion to share with you that these requests sometimes require a lot of thought, a lot of deliberation, and a lot of work on the part of a records officer. And oftentimes they have to hire people like me to help them through it. Exemption D, which I'm not going to get into too much, talks about the deliberative process exemption, which oftentimes when I deal with it on behalf of clients, it talks about litigation strategy. And you may say, well, why can't you just tell us what you're talking about in your litigation strategy? Because we're often strategizing about how most beneficially for the town, i.e. the taxpayer, i.e. educational resources, we can resolve a legal claim. We don't want to tip our hand, increase our exposure to a judgment or damages claim, which would then take educational resources that could be spent on students and pay claims instead. You don't want to be in that situation. It's not overall in the best interest of your students. So those things can be withheld. The final exemption I'm going to talk to you about is F, investigatory materials. We have often counseled clients, or most often counseled them, to withhold anything that would identify a witness in an investigation or a person who came forward with a complaint. Because if word gets out that you're in the habit of giving up those people's identities, the next time you do an investigation, how many people are going to come forward as witnesses? Probably zero. That won't help you get to the truth of the matter, which also is not in the best interest of your students. That doesn't keep anybody safe. So we need to protect the privacy of witnesses who cooperate, and if we do that, they come forward and they also speak freely and hopefully truthfully, accurately. So this all is to the good of what you want to do, is to make your schools safe, right? Next. Okay, so all of that being said, the process for requesting public records, you send an email or a letter to the record access officer, and then you get the ball rolling. After the record access officer receives your request, within 10 business days, they write back to you and confirm the request, tell you what stuff you need to ask somebody else for. Sometimes you ask for something that the town might have, a liability insurance policy. All that stuff is with the town. Identify anything that the records access officer is going to withhold based on all or some of those exemptions I just mentioned to you. And if the request is expansive, they may need more than 10 business days to get the records to you. So they can tell you up to 25 business days of time that they might need to get the records to you. because as I mentioned earlier, they may have to scrub some of them of personally identifiable information. They can also charge a fee for the records. It's not because they're terrible people who want to drive you away. It's because it costs money in terms of staff resources to do this. And the state has set up a scheme where it's allowable to pass the cost on from the taxpayer to the individual requestor. The districts that I work with, including Danvers, don't recoup 100% of their costs, but they do recoup some by assessing fees. And, you know, it's something they do to ease the burden on the taxpayer. And if the requesting person doesn't agree with the fee assessment or the scope of what's going to be produced, they can appeal to the state supervisor of public records to get a different answer, and the school district will abide by it. Okay, so a little bit more about fees. If there's a record that's freely available, they're not going to charge you for it. Collective bargaining agreements, budgets, stuff like that. Even like a payroll run, I think wouldn't take very long. They're not going to charge you for that. But if it's going to be something that's going to take, you know, a matter of hours, they'll send you a bill. And without permission of the state, they can't charge you more than $25 an hour. And the time spent includes searching, obviously, compiling, segregating exempt from non-exempt, and then redacting. That's what takes the bulk of the time, is to take out all that personally identifiable information that the district's required to do before it gets put into the public domain. Now, the employee time can include employees and people like myself or technology people. I gotta tell you, I don't charge $25 an hour, so when I go on the clock, typically the district does not recoup nearly what it costs them in legal fees, I'll tell you that. But it is what it is. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, the law permits fee assessments. And again, the fee assessment scheme allows the district to shift the burden of the request from the taxpayer to the individual making the request. And if they don't get the full recoupment, they have to find money in the budget to cover it. They have to take away from something else to make sure that the person who's spending the time on getting the records gets paid, and you have to find the money somewhere. Okay. All right, so this is kind of getting redundant, but the factors that they apply in figuring out the exemptions, obviously the student records, there's no balancing. Anything that can use to personally identify a student record information is scrubbed from what the requester is going to ultimately receive. Any personnel information, after balancing the public interest in knowing versus the reasonable expectation of privacy, there's a determination made, and then the redactions are made accordingly. You may ask, like, what do you mean a right of privacy? Well, there's a privacy baked into the law about employees. They don't give up all their privacy rights just because they take a public job. So there's a invasion of privacy statute, and then there's a personnel record statute that we read together to create this right of privacy in what I just talked about earlier, which is evaluative information. Anything that, if released to the public, might cause embarrassment to a person for the public knowing it. And if the district doesn't do its work in withholding that information, they may get sued. They may have to pay claims, which again would take away from money that could be spent educating kids. We talked about the investigatory materials and the reasons why you redact those. Go ahead, Mary, if you want to do the next one. And again, doing the process that ends up sometimes looking like this takes time. It wouldn't take that much time if you could withhold an entire record from a requester and say, that has information, put that in the withhold pile. But the law requires districts to take a document and scrub it of personal identification information and then produce it. That latter process takes more time than just saying, document yes, document no. So that's why if you make a request and you see a fee that you think is exorbitant, I just want you to understand what goes into the process and why the fee is what it is. Okay, and again, oftentimes more than just a name needs to be redacted to make sure that a student's identity is properly concealed, or a staff member who's met with an unfortunate situation, their identity is being concealed rightly. Okay, Mary, next slide.
Is it this one?
And again, looking back at that definition of personally identifiable information, I think you'll see what I mean. If you can put this together with that, you'll figure out who this person is. Okay. And then I just want to give you a couple of examples of ripped from the headlines, stuff that we've seen over the years. You know, if you get a request, if Keith gets a request for all special education settlement agreements for the last 3 years, he can't just say to the requester, I'm not giving you any of that, it's all confidential, it deals with a student, and you're not getting it. He can't do that. He has to say, okay, I have to figure out how many there are, how long it's going to take me to review, cull, separate, segregate, redact. And then he has to go through them and say, okay, how much information in here can I release without revealing the identity of the student who is the subject of this settlement agreement? Depending on how much the community knows, whether it's the school community or the community at large, about who's in what special ed programs in the district, the answer depends. Let's say there's a special ed agreement for a placement at a school that has a very highly specialized program. Well, it may turn out that your records person has to redact the name of the school. You might have to redact any descriptions of the nature of the disability because of what's known in the community. This child may have a very unique set of circumstances that would make them instantly identifiable if that stuff wasn't scrubbed out of the record. You see where I'm going with this? So you may get, again, you may get something that looks like this in the end. You'll get some information, but probably not nearly as much as you expected. Okay? Another one, the 2021 special education settlement involving John Jones. Obviously, you can't produce really anything because whatever you produce is necessarily related to that person. And so that one you really can't even say whether you have anything in response to that. The next one, like I said earlier, any special education placement agreements for the XYZ private school. If that school is so specialized, and the community could probably put 2 and 2 together and know which kid we're talking about, then that whole, response might be, I'm sorry, I can't share anything with you. Emails, very difficult to respond in any efficient way. Email, as you probably know, is organized and maintained not according to its content, but according to its form most of the time. So if I get a request, or Keith does, that says all emails regarding John Jones for the last 3 years, oh, let me go to the John Jones email file. That's not how records are organized in public schools. So you would have to ask your, in most cases, your IT person and say, can you do a search for any emails regarding or having the name John Jones in them for the last 3 years? Tell me how many hits you get back. And the IT person's going to say 24,000 or some crazy number. Because A, there may be more than one John Jones in the district, or B, John Jones may be referred to as John Jones, JJ, J period Jones. And so you have to get all of those emails and actually read through them to see if they're responsive, figure out how much stuff has to be scrubbed out of them because you can't release anything that's invasive of John Jones' privacy. So you can see how the task of responding to requests takes time. In the next example I give, anything regarding, between John Jones and his principal regarding any discipline that was imposed on him, you can't even say that you have anything responsive to that because that would violate his privacy off the get-go. If you say, I have stuff, but I'm not giving it to you, then you'll know John Jones was disciplined, which violates his privacy. So I'm just trying to, help people understand what we go through. Anyway, so let's say that, a request was made, the officer did what he was supposed to do, searched for the records, culled the records, produced the records, and the request is not satisfied and thinks you over withheld or under disclosed or charged them too much. They can file an appeal with the state supervisor of records. It's free. The SPR, State Supervisor of Public Records, can weigh in on a bunch of issues, including whether you got overcharged and so on. And they don't weigh in until after you file your appeal. You can't get like a appeal finding. The schools can't. They have to do their best responding to the request. And then if the request is not satisfied, then the supervisor can weigh in. They issued written determinations. They're all available on the state website. And if they want, the requesting person can also file a court action. Okay, so this is my last slide. Just striking the balance. This is the thing that really people struggle with between undersharing and oversharing information. I found some articles from other districts in other lands. New Hampshire Municipal Association, I can't see without the light on, Balancing Act, public schools must protect student privacy while making these records public on request. Thank you. This one from an attorney, Town and Country Magazine, to disclose or not to disclose, public employment information and the right to know law. And then finally, the National Center for Education Statistics, privacy issues in education staff records, guidelines for education agencies. So not only this district has struggled with this balancing, a lot of folks have, sorry, I don't need the light anymore. So the things that you think about is the public interest in knowing what it is that's being asked about. Gaining and maintaining public confidence in what you guys do. Protecting individual rights of privacy, we talked about that. Protecting student information. And then that balancing act. How much information needs redaction in order to conceal somebody's identity? That's a fluid thing because it often depends, as I mentioned, on how much publicity is out there on any given topic. So it can be fluid. At the beginning, maybe, it might be that the public knows very little and you don't want to be the source of that info, but as stories get more notoriety, the public gets more information, and you may be in a situation where you can disclose more than you otherwise could have earlier, or vice versa. So, once again, it's what would constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy? What would constitute a warranted invasion of privacy? What's out there in the public domain to begin with? Those are the struggles that your records officer is dealing with. And my firm, to be quite candid with you, often advises, take a conservative approach at the beginning. I'd rather have you undershare information, have the person ask for a second opinion from the state, and the state says, you undershared, you need to give a little bit more, than to do the opposite and overshare at the very beginning. So we have a state supervisor who's happy to give a second set of eyes. I don't look at it as an adversarial thing. I say, great, I would love someone to help me do this balancing of privacy versus public right to know. Tell us what to do and we'll comply. So if you see a report that says, Danvers is concealing information, it's probably not like that. We're trying to approach this cautiously so as not to invade anybody's privacy in an unwarranted way, and we'd like the state to weigh in, that's all. And as for the fees, I hope I gave you a little bit of enlightenment about why it is that you see a fee assessment that you see if you request. All right. And I just have to finish with this. There's no continuum in the law about, sympathy, reprehensibility. Like, whether someone did something that is minor in nature or absolutely reprehensible, it doesn't really change the privacy analysis. The law doesn't allow us to say, well, you don't have an expectation of privacy because you're evil. Or conversely, you know, you have a great expectation of privacy because, you know, you didn't do anything bad. It's not like that. If it were, the legislature would have told us. It's not that simple. So, and finally, not everybody's going to be satisfied about how the balance gets struck, right? The person who's the subject of records doesn't want anything disclosed, and people on the other end want everything disclosed. So we have to figure out how to do these things. So that was it. I just figured maybe you want to know what goes into these things, because you guys are usually not involved in any way, shape, or form, because you're not the records officer. So with that, through you, the chair, if any member of the committee, or I don't know if you're taking questions at this point,
Sure.
but I'd be happy to either move it along or...
Thank you, Roseanne. Well, I did want Roseanne, both for the public and the committee, to sort of lay out what we deal with, not only when we do public information requests, but just in general, the world in which we live in when we have to make decisions, what we can talk about, what we can't talk about, and because I know sometimes it frustrates people. Having said that, are there questions on the committee? Arthur?
I don't have any. I think I have a pretty good understanding, but thanks for coming tonight, Roseanne. Thanks.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Alice?
This is interesting. Thank you for presenting it to us. I think it provides us a clear view of why we see what we see coming from your team. I guess I have just a question about like social media, because you're talking a lot about you can make assumptions about a person's identity. How is social media in play with any of this?
It's difficult. It is in play, but it's tough because what you see on social media may or may not be accurate, but it's out there. And that's another thing about releasing information about an investigation. Sometimes what's could be released is allegations that are made that are not proven. But if they're out in the public domain, they may create assumptions on people's part that those are actually established, which just because someone says something happened doesn't mean it did, right? So social media, yes, goes into the mix. But we take whatever we see with a grain of salt. And oftentimes your records officer doesn't have the whole pantheon of everything social media because they probably are too busy doing their job to look at social media, you know? So that's a phenomenon that it doesn't really fit with all of this. It's very difficult to deal with the world we live in right now and trying to struggle with these concepts. But they do the best they can.
Yeah, thank you for answering that way. I think our biggest struggle is, right, that balance of being transparent, but following the laws as much as possible. So thank you for taking the time to take us through this.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, no comments, thank you.
I'm surprised everybody
Robin,
stayed
you
awake.
Yeah, both of them are.
I was going to tell everybody to have a shot of espresso before I started, but
All right, thank you, Roseanne.
All right, thank you.
We appreciate the work you do for us and the time you took tonight. Thank you. All right, next up, strategic plan, elementary and secondary school ESSER update.
All right. So tonight's strategic plan presentation is going to be on the ESSER funding that we've gotten for last year and then this school year, and then we'll continue on for another. So we're going to present kind of what we did past school year and then tell you about our plans for the coming school year. So our district work for the next 2 years are around three pillars. And over the past couple of school committee meetings, we've done presentations on each of the pillars, but the first one is the coherent curriculum instruction assessment, and we're working in the areas here to develop high-impact teacher teams that use formative assessments so that we have a understanding of what each student understands in the classroom and the content we're teaching them, so we can help students if they're not quite meeting that goal that we've set out for them, and or extend kids if they are already at that area. Another one is focusing on elementary reading. It's a big part of our work this year. And then working on the multi-tier system of support, really kind of working on that acceleration and getting all kids up to grade level learning. Diversity, equity, inclusion is our second pillar, working on providing culturally responsive learning opportunities. We are really working a lot on building a sense of belonging in our school, classroom, and district communities. We're establishing a school environment where all feel valued, heard, and supported. And we're implementing professional learning so that all adults working with our students will strive to become anti-racist educators. Our final pillar is the safe and supportive learning environments. We did a presentation on that last school committee meeting, and we're working here to support all students in an inclusive, emotionally supportive, and culturally responsive environment. We're really focusing on community and building relationships between teachers and students, prioritizing student safety, and implementing practices that build social emotional capacities within students, faculty, and staff. Turn over to
So tonight, right, it's kind of all about the numbers in the second half of our meeting. So wanted to provide an overview of what our funding of COVID response funding has been. This is a similar slide that we showed you last year, but you'll see that we had the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the Remote Learning Essentials, the State Coronavirus Prevention Fund, and then 3 allocations of ESSER. The majority of the money has been spent through ESSER 1 on that chart, and as we look at ESSER 2 and 3, that's the money that we've been spending this year and that we'll spend over the next 2 years. As we dive deeper into our presentation, you'll hear us talk about this is the money, or one source of the money where we're really talking about our new programming or continuing the programming that we put into place this year to continue to accelerate students' learning, as well as provide some of those behavioral and mental health supports, along with an additional funding source that we'll talk about later in the Student Opportunity Act. So you'll see here again is a breakdown of the funding that we spoke about last year and what our multi-year spending plan was. So it's spending equal amounts of money over the 3 spending years, allowing for inflation and staff advancement on the various salary charts.
Great. So here's a chart that conveys what we've done in the past school year around each area with our ESSER money. So in elementary school, we worked on accelerating reading progress through their multi-tier system support. And so what we did was we hired our additional reading specialists so that we were able to help move students forward, and we've really been using our reading data to do that work. At Holton Richmond, we are working to support teachers to implement instructional practices that will meet the needs of the range of learners in a classroom. We did it through teacher fellows who are coming in to help in the science STEM area, as well as in the humanities area. So, and then we also hired a social health support so that we were able to do coaching for social emotional learning. So we have a social emotional learning coach, and Jeff Bartlett, who's been working for many years on social emotional learning at the middle school level. And then finally, at Danvers High, we're working same thing, supporting teachers to implement instructional practices that will meet the needs of the range of learners in the classroom through the use, though, of instructional technicians. So instead of hiring teachers, we're hiring instructional technicians, which are like teacher aides that are experts and becoming they're in the stages of becoming teachers. So they're helping teachers in the classroom with the extra set of hands and being helping with some interventions. They're also helping with our credit recovery at the Danvers High School. They also been helping a lot in our ESL program as well, and supporting students in the early college program. So they've really been a wonderful addition to Danvers High and helped us do some of the supporting programming that we needed. So here's how we spent the money over the last school year. So at the district level, we had professional development, and we spent $81,114. We budgeted about $30,000 for professional learning community facilitators, but that actually is costing us $56,000, and that is money very well spent. It's facilitators at in each like grade level discipline course or course grouping at the high school, where there's about be 3 or 4 teachers that are working together, that there's a facilitator running those meetings and kind of working on the initiatives that are happening inside the school around the multi-tier system of support. At the school levels, they each had $300,000, and that was to hire the teachers I spoke about in the last slide. So at the elementary, it was 2 reading teachers. At the middle school, it was 3 teacher fellows. And at the high school, it was 3 instructional technicians. And then finally, the other expenses that we had were for PPEs, supplies that we needed to help support and do the interventions we talked about, and some materials. So that was about $50,000. So that was a one-year total of $1,031,114.
So then as we compare what that budget was versus the actual, once we actually implemented our hiring, implemented the cost of benefits, and all of those different pieces, you'll see that at the bottom line of that chart that's in bold, it says a surplus of $301,000. So of that $1 million, we only spent $739,000. So that's going to allow us to roll that additional funding into the last 2 years of our spending, or the next 2 years. So you'll see that our kind of updated FY23 spending target for next year will be $1.2 million for us to spend. So now Mary will talk a little bit about what that budget looks like for next year. So we've done a planning process with our administrative council team to look at what's worked well this year, where we think there could be improvements, to develop what that spending looks like for FY23. And again, this is where that spending and programming is, and when we get to our budget later, we'll see it's kind of a level service budget just to get to what our contractual obligations are.
So as you see, the slide looks very similar to what I just read, but so we're keeping the PLC leaders and keeping that around at the 56,000 mark, and continuing with our district-wide professional development to help with the accelerating learning and reading skills of our teachers and teacher aides and Title I teachers. At school level, we are working on keeping the 2 reading specialists, and then as well as we'd like to add a behavior coach to support the 5 schools. So that's an extra $100,000 at the elementary level, again, to help teachers with some of the behaviors that we're seeing in the classrooms. So at the middle school.
If I can real quick, just to add to that, right now our coaching model, we have a math coach and we have a literacy coach, and those are kind of in the general academic setting. And then we have ABA aides and we have BCBAs that are really behavioral based for students on IEPs. A behavior coach would be able to help support students and teachers both in the regular ed setting and the special education setting. So it's really adding to that breadth of support for all teachers in the district, and it's a model that we would essentially pilot in year 1, and if we needed to add additional FTEs to really support teachers, we would look to do that in future years.
Now, are those, if I can ask, those behavioral coaches or the behavioral coach, is that a coach to work with the teachers in terms of student behavior, or will that coach work directly with students? How does that work?
A combination of both, but to really give the teacher those resources and to be that ally like we have when they're a literacy or math coach to support those teachers. They would also support the teacher aides that would help with some of that, you know, the day-to-day programming inside the building.
Thanks.
Sorry, Mary.
Oh, that's okay, that was fine. So at the middle school and high school, we are, same thing, we're funding the same technicians and teacher fellows that we had done in the previous years. There's an extra $4,000 in the high school, and then we're adding in support for hall monitors. So that's the extra money that you see at the high school. And then for other expenses, we have more money in that because for $111,000. And again, we still need some PPE, but mostly it's the supplies and materials that we need to support that acceleration of learning and the interventions for students.
And it's also great, we can use the money through ESSER for culturally responsive curriculum. So if it's something that comes up, anything from culturally responsive read-alouds to accelerating learning through, I know we've talked with Robin about the science of reading and buying different phonics materials, and so all of that type of funding can come out of that $110,000 that we can be nimble as we're looking to adjust to what we need to during the year.
So I think we can go quickly through these slides because we've already talked a lot about this. Again, so we are continuing on with our reading teachers, and the model is accelerating reading progress, K-5. We are continuing the 2 reading teachers to really help with the extra supports. We call it Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 1 is just all the instruction that kids get in the classroom, but Tier 2 and 3 are students that might need extra support and that we have the reading teachers to help plan for that support. And then we also are providing specific training for all teachers in research-based multisensory reading programs, so that, you know, no matter what your struggle is with reading, that we're able to give you what you need. So that, based on a whole variety of programs that we have at our disposal. So we're continuing, as I said, to support those reading teachers. At the middle school, the theme is the multi-tier system of support. We're going to use interventionists to accelerate learning. And as in the past, we talked about having more STEM humanities type of people working in the schools. And this next school year, we're really focusing it in on ELA and math, again, just to really work on supporting that multi-tier system of support. We will continue the SEL coach to really work on the social emotional learning and help teachers kind of integrate that into the content area instruction. So, and at the high school, we are going to stay with the instructional technician program, and we've been able to document a little bit more about what they've been doing, because this year we really got a feel for how they can support learning at the high school level. So they will continue to help in Tier 1 and Tier 2 and go in and assist teachers with some interventions, be able to take those small groups to help teachers, help the classroom teachers and really move those students along in their learning. We have the new community meeting block, so they also join in there and partner up with homeroom teachers and help the students that do some of the lessons that they do in the community block, but also during the focus time, that's the other days of the week, where they're really working on their executive functioning skills, and if they need that extra help, the technicians are there to do it. Let's see, I think I spoke about all the rest of this, but they could provide supplemental tutoring. They also, you know, they've been able to help with the ESL program when we've had some students that had definite needs of support with the teachers. They've been able to do that, and they're helping with our early college program. We still see a place for them to also support students, and as they are making up some of the work that they miss when they're out at North Shore Community College. So, the district level, we're going to continue to have the professional learning community PLC leaders, and we're working on, we provide support for them to do that work. We're also working at the multi-tier system of support and really helping teachers on how to manage the small group learning happening in their classroom. In Research for Better Teaching, we have a course called High Expectations Teaching, and that course will be offered in the August of 2023, and then we'd like to try to offer that course across the school year. That has about a max of about 25 teachers in that class, so we want to be able to offer it multiple times of the year. And this really gets to that culturally responsive teaching and really being able to meet the needs of all learners. And that course is excellent for that, to help teachers understand how to do that work in the classroom. And then we will continue. We have a 3-year work that we do in what's called the Multi-Tier System of Support Academy that's sponsored by the Department of Ed. And we are in the one that is called Culturally Responsive Practice Leadership Academy. And that's really helping us think deeply about how we implement those equity and inclusion practices in our school district. And we thank Robin, as she's the representative from the school committee that is on that team with us. That's our ESSER funding.
All set?
All set.
All right, questions, we'll start with Alice.
Yeah, I want to go back to a comment that was made by a community member about the behavioral issues that we're seeing in schools, because I've spoken to you both about this. You know, there's fights now all of the time. It's becoming a real issue, and I guess as I listen to words like behavioral coach, an SEL coach, then we have Jeff Bartlett. I'm not sure what he does at Holton Richmond, but I'm just, are we doing enough? Because I hear that we're training our teachers and our educators and our staff, but I guess I'm not convinced that it's enough right now for what is needed in our schools. And, you know, we don't have to solve it all right now, but I do think that this is going to be an issue that us as a district is gonna have to face over the next couple of months is figuring out how to address the behavioral issues in the classroom. It's elementary, it's the middle school, and it's the high school. And I just wanna make sure that what we're using the ESSER funds for is the best way to solve for that. Or again, when we go through the budget a little bit later, is it gonna be in there as well? So it's not necessarily a question, it's just I wanted to put this out here as a school committee for us just to be more aware of as we discuss this.
Thank you, Ellis. Robin?
The only question I have is, I know this is up until 2023, so, and obviously I think everything we're doing is important. It would be ideal if we could have done this, you know, prior to the pandemic, but are we gonna be able to, Mr. Taverna, this is a, you know, budget question, sustain this after ESSER runs out?
And I think that's the question to be seen. That's the question that we're all asking.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally, yes,
Okay.
right? And as we talk about we'll talk a little bit about the Student Opportunity Act tonight, and then we're gonna talk about that more at our March meeting before we vote on the budget as the budget picture becomes clear. But we're also trying to be strategic, and you'll see us making some tweaks because the Student Opportunity Act money will be money that's going into our base that will be here forever. And then some of this money is programming that potentially may need to subside. So you'll see some movement of positions between the different funding sources to make sure that, you know, let's say we're gonna look to increase again around the behavioral supports and the psychological support and student mental health, and talking about getting our psychologists to really be doing direct services to kids. That's some of the funding that we're gonna put into the Student Opportunity Act, because we know it's gonna stay, versus some of these other positions are positions we're spending the money on it because it's important. Right, but that, you know, we have to do that evaluation of prioritizing it as we go.
Okay, and then the other thing, I know we brought in the science of reading, and I had a lot of like really positive conversations with Ms. Wormers and Ms. Pasternak, and we're really, I think that, you know, we're doing great work there with really going back to the science of reading, and I think that we're gonna see a lot of like strong improvements with the elementary kids, and then with, eventually, you know, as they move up in the grades, they'll be in middle school, and, you know, we'll be at that target that we really wanted to reach, so, thank you.
All set, Robin?
Yes, thanks.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm glad that a lot of the money is being used in the classroom. I mean, I think that's where it has the biggest impact. We know we have a lot of catch-up to do for a lot of the learners, so having the money allocated for that, I think, will be great. And I guess we'll see, right? In the next 6 months or so, I would expect that some of the, you know, personalized evaluations that we do of students, not standardized tests, but we'll know whether this is working correct, and if it is, continue the course, and if there's other areas that need more attention, it looks like we have the capacity to adjust some of those strategies if there are courses or areas that need more attention. It looks like we can do that too, so that's appreciated that we're looking at this right now. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Arthur?
I'm all set, thanks.
I mean, I like what I see. I think that, however, you know, I share some concerns about making sure that we're getting things down to the student level in terms of the behavior and the mental health piece. So as long as we keep that in the front of our mind in terms of the professional development that we're doing and the way we're spending that money, I just think it's awfully important. And the student behavior piece is becoming an issue clearly, and a lot of it may simply be from the pandemic, and as we get further back to a sense of normalcy, it may clear, but it has been difficult on adults, so it's definitely been difficult on young people, and I just think that has to remain an absolute, it's a critical piece, I think, it's a critical piece. Are you seeing, let me ask our student representative, are you seeing issues in the high school with, you know, students' emotional reactions to things and physical confrontation? That you are? Okay.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is definitely in response to the pandemic.
I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone if you could.
Yeah, I would agree with you that a lot of it is in response to the pandemic because Reese and I are both juniors in high school and we have never known a normal year of high school. So I think that is a huge part of the issue.
To add on to that too, I think students also have been, their like creative outlet also has been taken away from them, and a lot of students don't have like a way they can express themselves like they would with like theater, because like we haven't had like any of the theater stuff. So students who put their like attention towards that, that's been taken away, and I think that's like not necessarily causing like behavioral issues, but like the mental health like aspect of everything. And I think since students are just losing respect for school because of the pandemic and aren't taking it seriously because, you know, it's like it hasn't been a normal year. Like Lil said, like we haven't had a normal year. Like our freshman year got cut short, and then ever since then it's been masks and mandates and all this stuff. So I think having like that creative outlet where students can't express themselves is also a big portion of all that.
Thank you. I think the insights of our students are helpful. I think we have to pay attention to what's happening, get ahead of it if we can, provide the right supports, because getting back to normal means allowing students to focus on learning and having an environment which helps that. So yeah, that's something the school committee is committed to, and I know our administration is too. So, but I think we'll listen to what you're telling us. Thank you. All right, back to Mr. Taverna.
So for our grants update tonight, you just have a link in your agenda for the list of grants for FY22. They are approximately $3 million higher than our grants in FY21, which is the ESSER spending.
Okay. Any questions on grants? I don't hear any. All right. Changes in the changes in the administrative team. Was there a particular item we were looking at here?
I think this is where you were going to discuss Dr. Dana's leave, as the original 6 weeks has
Oh, yeah,
expired and what
okay.
the plan is.
Because the
going forward.
contract piece is next, actually.
Yes, so they're kind of tied together. There's two
Let's
different
put
items.
A and B together. So as people know, Dr. Dana has been out, I want to say about, has it been 12 weeks already, or? No,
6 weeks.
6 weeks, okay. So we initially, as a committee, appointed Keith and Mary as co-acting superintendents. But enough time has gone by that we actually haven't approved a contract yet. So what we need to do tonight is to sort of retrospectively approve the contract that runs until today, I believe, and then consider an extension. So do we have a motion to approve the initial contract for both Mary and Keith? And this is sort of an additional, I guess you call it a working agreement. It's not a new contract. It's like an addendum to your existing contract.
So I would make a motion to approve contracts for one each for Keith and Mary as co-acting superintendents through February 14th, which is today, and to also direct you, Mr. Chairman, to sign those contracts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? I saw Jeff reaching for his microphone.
No discussion, thank you.
No discussion. I would simply say that you are both doing a really strong job for us during this time. It's obviously a time of uncertainty, but it's clear to me, and I'm lucky in the sense that I get to communicate with both of you a little more probably than, maybe a little more than the other members. And I am impressed by how you work together and what you have been able to keep moving forward. And I mentioned the elementary presentation on anti-bias work in the elementary schools. That was terrific, Mary. And you have kept the balls rolling, so to speak, almost seamlessly. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else does too. So we have a motion for I want to point out The contract also is a matter of public record because they are essentially 2 people now doing the job of 3 people. We have increased sort of call it a stipend, as it were, of $500 per week for each of them during the time that they're doing this work. And I'm seeing it as money well spent, and we appreciate it. If there's no further discussion, would all those in favor of approving the contract through February 14th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? It carries. Is there another motion now that we've taken care of things till today?
I would now move to approve an extension for both Keith and Mary of the contracts through April 11th.
And I would say that we, based on what we know now, our sense is that Dr. Dana would be out at least through that date, so we want to make sure that we have continuity going forward. The date of the 11th at this point seems sensible to us. It's not for any particular, it's not a red letter date for any reason. So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there discussion? No discussion. So again, the contract terms are the same. This will take you through the 11th. I take it you want to keep doing this. All right, that's correct. All right.
Don't answer too quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say it, really. So, all right, without any, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Carries. Thank you, and keep up the good work. We appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, where are we now? We are on North Shore Educational Consortium Board Member appointment. Dr. Dana was acting as the Danvers representative to the board of the North Shore Educational Consortium, so we need to replace her temporarily. And Keith, I think, attended the last meeting but wasn't able to vote. Are you willing to continue in that role, Keith?
Yes.
All right. Is there a motion on the floor?
I would move to appoint Keith as the North Shore Educational Consortium Board Member from Danvers.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, carries. All right, we are on to our public hearing on the budget.
So I think we've talked a lot about numbers tonight. We'll try to, it's a lengthy presentation, but we're going to move quick. You've already heard a lot of the concepts, and a lot of it is background information as to what our annual budget process is, so we'll try to keep moving. So if we go to the first slide, just our annual budget process, we always are focusing on the strategic plan to make sure our spending is aligned, reviewing all of our program and accounts, looking at the year in review, looking at the next year, looking at our historical perspective of where we've been, looking at the budget proposal, and then having our questions and discussion. So our timeline, again, December to February, we work with our administrative team to develop the budget. In February, we're here presenting to school committee. In March, school committee meeting, the committee will vote. In April, we go to the finance committee and the select board sometime between March and April for their review of the budget. May 16th, I believe, is the annual town meeting this year where the final vote comes, which is where we then start all of our hiring practices for the next year. The fiscal year officially begins on July 1st, and then obviously in September, we start our next school year.
So everything that we do in the budget is really based on our mission and vision. Our mission for the Danvers Public Schools is that Danvers Public Schools is a dynamic community of independent learners dedicated to respect, responsibility, creativity, and the pursuit of academic and personal excellence. We have 4 core values. They're caring, quality, commitment, and collaboration. And in our vision, we talk about what we want from our students, or what we want to provide for our students. And the 2 visuals show you the engaged student in the middle, which is really our ultimate goal, that they're engaged in their learning. We have the 3 pillars that I talked about in the earlier presentation, but the other a graphic that we've been doing is really talk about what that engaged student is. It's a student that is seen, valued, and heard, and that they belong in our community, and so everyone belongs. So underneath the everyone belongs is that vision statement that we have for the Danvers Public Schools, which is that we're an inclusive community of learners that is respectful of individual differences, in which students are valued for their unique strengths, talents, and challenges. A welcoming environment for students and families is evident, and diversity is valued and celebrated. And strategic plan, what we do, we have a cycle that we develop that plan, we identify goals and strategies, and then each year we have an action plan that we have in place to implement those strategies. And then from there, the buildings, each school develops their school improvement plan that helps us move along the strategic plan. We implement that at the school level and the district level, and then at the end of the year, we kind of evaluate and make mid-course corrections and revise. And you've seen that over the years as we have developed, looked at our pillars, and then halfway through our plan, kind of changed our those pillars and our focus. So building the budget, we have the 3 priorities, which are the 3 pillars that we've talked about earlier: the safe and supportive learning environments, coherent curriculum instruction and assessment, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this budget supports those 3 pillars.
So as we look at our FY22 review, our tax supported appropriation was $44,673,000. We continue to closely monitor our areas around the costs related to COVID, including staffing and substitute, changing student needs and staffing, our ESSER funding that we reviewed earlier tonight, our special education out-of-district placement, our aids, and our other curricular needs. As we look at our budget development for FY23, we really do a zero-based process where we review all items, we review all of our personnel structures, we assess our non-salary and textbook and curriculum resources, our contracts that we have with different vendors, we factor our known retirements into the budget, we review the fees and apply for any grants that we can have to help offset expenses. So again, we really dig into each program. So this is what happens with our administrative teams. This is an overview of how it works with them. Looking at our student needs and staffing, looking at our enrollment in different buildings and different classrooms and different programs. Again, focusing on the strategic plan, it's our guiding principles. Preserve the solid foundation and focus on all of the programmatic needs. Look at our contractual obligations, that always makes up the majority of our spending. Looking at special education, and then again, what our supplemental needs may be. For FY23, as we look at our town-wide challenges and assumptions, we do have a significant challenge that comes from out-of-district tuitions. We've had 5 students move into Danvers that used to live in different communities who attend out-of-district schools. That will come with a cost of approximately $600,000 for next year's budget. We are thankful to our town partners with Steve Bartha and Rodney Conley and the rest of the town team to help us look at how we can offset those expenses. So we are looking at the one-time use of funding to help us increase our balance in circuit breaker, and then looking at the establishment of a stabilization fund to help with similar challenges in future years. And we'll get into more details about that in a few slides. Looking at our retirement funding and the cost to have that fully funded by the early 2030s. Monitoring of our health insurance expenses, which continue to go up quickly. Looking at the Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical School Assessment. We've talked a lot about that with the Select Board and Finance Committee over the last few years, and the rising number of students in attendance. And then our goal to shift our OPEB expense from free cash to be part of the tax levy, as that's the next structural funding mechanism that we need to put into place after retirement. Looking at our programmatic needs and our resource allocation. So again, we talked about contractual obligations. That's both on the personnel front and the transportation front. So our big yellow bus contract. Looking at our enrollment, our forecasted growth and change. You'll see in the budget we have an additional 4th grade classroom proposed for next year that meets that rising cohort since the building opened or right before. And then a decrease of a teacher in 5th grade based on a smaller cohort coming from 4th grade to 5th grade. So the 4th grade at Thorpe this year is only 2 classrooms. Next year we're proposing the 5th grade to be 2 classrooms in alignment with that same model. Changing student needs, as we've had an increase in some of, again, our behavior programs at Smith School. There's the addition of a teacher aide. So that's really there's 1.0 net position added to this budget, so very minimal. And then looking at our elementary reading and curriculum, assessment and classroom materials, the increased cost of inflation, and the increased cost of licenses and software. So really, all of our curriculum materials are level serviced, but not level funded, due to the rising costs of the various programs and supplies and materials. A review of our contractual obligations that we do every year. So our teachers have 15 steps and a cost of living adjustment that was negotiated last year of 2.25%. Our aides have 6 steps with a cost of living adjustment of 2%. Our administrative assistants 6 steps and 2%. And then our non-union staff do not have any steps in their compensation model, and then their cost of living adjustment will be based on evaluations that they have completed over the summer. So again, as we look at our out-of-district tuition challenge, we had those 5 student move-ins of approximately $600,000. So looking at funding our circuit breaker reserve fund, which is going to come through free cash, which if I didn't channel my inner Rodney right now, it's not free nor is it cash. He would want me to remind everybody. But the positive results we had from operations, maximizing our reimbursement from FEMA and CARES, and our conservative revenue projections versus the actual collection has allowed that to have a higher balance at the end of FY22 as we're forecasting and what the certified number is. So there'll be a one-time $600,000 allotment that will go into our circuit breaker reserve fund, and then we'll dip into that circuit breaker reserve fund next year to help offset those expenses. And then when we get to FY24, circuit breaker is a reimbursement program for tuitions that cost over $40,000. So as we get into FY24, that revenue will increase, which will help us bridge this gap over 2 years to help fix that piece structurally. As we look at the Special Education Stabilization Fund, that's the secondary piece. So that would be need an approval from school committee, select board, finance committee, and town meeting to establish that fund. The idea is to make an appropriation of $150,000, again from free cash for next year. And then we would dip into that should we have any unanticipated students that come to school next year, or hopefully keep making deposits into that account. So that the next time we have a $600,000 challenge like this, we essentially have a savings account there to dip into to help us bridge that gap. So again, very thankful to our team partners. That's $750,000 in additional appropriations and fundings that is really going to support the schools that could have resulted in cuts to programming and some real significant challenges that we would have had if they weren't able to come to the table with us. And again, the piece of the stabilization fund is spending is actually authorized through a school committee and select board vote, but does not need to go through the entire town meeting process because it was set up solely for this purpose to help districts when they have this type of challenge. So it was, I think, authorized in 2016. We didn't have it in place then, but we're looking to put it into place for next year.
Got it.
Looking at our identified needs for FY23, our contractual obligations for salaries are about $1.6 million. Looking at our staffing changes with 16,000, we see savings of 176,000 from retirements. Special education has an increase of 144,000. So again, that's just the inflationary factor of 3% on the existing tuitions that we have. So that's like the net number. The effective number of that would be $600,000 higher. That's not going into our appropriation because of how we're doing it.
Got it.
Our other non-salaries have about a $64,000 increase. And then again, our transportation line for our big yellow bus will see about a 2% increase, which will be approximately $9,000. We talked about our ESSER grant earlier this evening. Again, that's really where the programmatic money is going into for what our initiatives are, and the budget is funding, that baseline level serviced type of budget for this year. The Student Opportunity Act, we talked a little bit about that. We originally submitted our Student Opportunity Act money in March of 2020. As Mary said, it focused on early college, expanding our learning centers at the elementary level, and teacher professional development and increased co-teaching in various areas. We'll need to submit an updated version to DESE in April of 2022. The governor did this year fully fund the Student Opportunity Act, so for the town of Danvers, that could mean approximately $500,000 to $600,000 in additional funding. We are waiting to see if that continues to move through the budget process. I guess I was remiss before when I didn't said that at this point, the town budget overall is not balanced. So our expenses for next year are still exceeding our revenues. So the Student Opportunity Act is one of the areas that we'll look at to help balance the budget in cooperation with the town, as well as put an investment into new programming, which is what we talked about, the student mental health, and looking at school psychologists having direct support to students.
Okay.
So this is kind of like a placeholder, like stay tuned, because as the selectmen, the select board finalize their budget for March 1st that they then send out, we will be balanced by then, utilizing this money. So we'll come back to you with kind of a plan B at the March meeting as we work through those final details. But you will see our revised plans include intervention, inclusion, and acceleration, direct support for student mental health, potential expansion of our early college program, as well as support for our English language learners, which didn't make the slide that Mary and I have been talking up to this afternoon about what we're going to spend that Student Opportunity Act money, and that's what we'll be working with the Administrative Council on over the next month. So again, possible impacts to the FY23 budget is the continuing ongoing global pandemic, or if we want to say it's starting to turn into an endemic, whatever word you want to use there. Continuing to monitor our enrollments in preschool and special ed. Again, we've talked about tuition out, what are the implications around transportation for those students and other changing needs, and then continuing to monitor what that state and federal funding looks like. And there's always the possibility of litigation that could have an impact on our budget. So as we looked at our proposed budget for FY23, it's $46,323,478. This is an allocation chart. You'll see about 82% of our money is spent on people. So those are where our contractual obligations are. And then 11% on special education. And then really it's only 6, 7, 8% on all of the other non-salary supports that we have for more discretionary funding. If we look at our per pupil, the FY21 data has not been released to date. We continue to be around and just slightly above the state average for our per pupil spending. If we look at our percentage that Chapter 70 aid makes up of our overall spending, you'll see that we're at about 16.1% for FY22. I would anticipate that when the FY23 numbers are finalized with the Student Opportunity Act being fully funded, that percentage will go up slightly. It will not go up greatly. The way the Student Opportunity Act is structured is it's really looking at making sure we're leveling the playing field for all students in Massachusetts. So the more low-income students you have and the more high-need students you have, the more funding that you received as part of that. This is now just looking at our Chapter 70 in the form of pie charts, just to show it in a different way, but is the same information as the previous slide. As we look at our budget increase over the past, I think it's 12 years now as we look at this chart over the life of our different strategic plans, our 12-year average has been 3.3%. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that this year is 3.69 or $1.6 million. And again, I just want to highlight that that's the number net of that circuit breaker reserve fund. So it's an effective increase of almost 2.2 million that would have been, in the 5% range if we didn't look at that alternative funding mechanism.
Sure.
For next year to help bridge the gap.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with questions. Mr. Skirmis.
Not too much, so this is budget number 15 and last for me. So a couple of things. First of all, I think that, do we think that I think I ask this every year, but the 3.69, is that number going to hold pending further discussions with the town?
So I think what you're going to see is it's going to go up.
Okay.
It's going to go up because of the Student Opportunity Act money. So if I had to forecast today, I would say that you're going to see about $650,000 in new money in Student Opportunity Act. About half of that will go to help balance the town budget, and about half of that will go towards new programmatic spending in the form of direct psychological mental health supports as well as ELL. Okay. So that number will go up by about $300,000. So it'll actually be closer to it'll be over a 4% increase, but we will highlight that, that's an increase because of the governor's direct funding to education in this year's budget.
Okay, and because I was a little bit concerned, well, not concerned, but when you mentioned that the town's budget isn't balanced yet, you know, I don't want it to come back on us, you know?
Nope, and I think, again, they've been such great town partners of not, we've asked for essentially $750,000 of extra money for next year, and I can tell you that they were right there to support us in that need. They understood the need, and so we're now gonna be equally good town partners as we look at how do we balance
Yeah.
all of those
Nope.
competing needs.
And that's one of the strengths, I think, over the years of the way that we work with the town. And this year, obviously, it's helped us greatly because that's an unexpected cost that we wouldn't and couldn't have predicted. And so that's greatly, that's, you know, we commend the town for working with us on that. So that's great. The budget overall, I mean, it's very similar to, I think, what I say a lot of years. I mean, if you look at it, the increase is usually and is very close to exactly what the salary obligations are. You know, it's one of those things where I think we always say it's too bad we don't have extra money to do some other things, but, you know, primarily we, as you say, Keith, you know, we're a people place, you know, and the people are what make the place go. And so, you know, there's not a lot of fluff that I can see in here, and there's no fluff in it, actually. Thankfully, thank God we have the ESSER money, because we really need that money to do some of the things that we need to do that we would not be able to do within the budget that we have. Obviously, we're not adding too many positions. We're not doing anything really crazy at all. It's really just a budget where we're continuing to meet our obligations, and with the extra money we get from ESSER, that we can do more things. So other than that, I don't really have any questions. It looks like a reasonable budget to me that I can support.
All right, thank you. Jeff?
No questions. I think my comments follow arts predominantly, which is, you know, over the past several years, we don't really have any new institutional programs. We don't have a lot of you know, additional staff that we've taken on. We've been fairly steady. Any increases have been because of the salaries, and, you know, every year something pops up, right? And so whether it's, you know, some of these circuit breaker needs or others, we're able, and we have the flexibility to deal with them. So, you know, I do think it's a responsible budget. You know, even if we wanted to, you know, reduce some things here, you really don't have an option to do that because of the contract. So, you know, for this year, it's fine, and we'll see where it goes. Thanks.
All right, Robin?
No questions.
Alice?
Keith was able to answer some of the questions that I had when this was originally released to me, but I want to make sure that it's out there. I think with an increase like this, it's just really important for us as a school committee to stay on assessments and following through on how well our students are performing, how well the experience is for the staff and teachers. So I think that's something that I just think we need to take a bit more active role in. I'd also be interested in getting an update from our new special education director, because it's been a few months since she's been in the position, so it would be interesting to get an update from her in one of the upcoming meetings as well, just given that such a large portion of the budget is spent on special education. So I'd kind of like to better understand that as well. And that's really all I have. And I look forward to kind of like working through some of the more details of what each of these different budget lines will entail in the coming months.
All set, Alice?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. There's not much here. I mean, we have basically, we're adding an aide at Smith. The teaching additions offset. The special education outplacement really presents a challenge, and we continue to work with the town to try and request an amount that works within their budget. It sounds like between the use or the assistance of the town in terms of the special ed and us assisting them to some extent with the Student Opportunity Act money, It works out so that we can do at least what we have to do, and with the ESSER money, a little something extra. But it's a bare bones budget, which we've said pretty much for the last several years. I did have one question on page A9 of the budget, which is, I think, a narrative. There is a reference down the bottom toward restructuring current support systems, and I just wondered if you might speak to that a little bit.
So obviously at the high schools, we've talked about the Essex Tech, we've seen an enrollment decrease. So with that lower enrollment at the high school, we need potentially less full-time equivalency of staff. But we also have, as we've talked about tonight, students that are struggling and our most at-risk students in various programs. That really, as Lynn has taken a look and Adam's taken a look, is coming in new to the district. There's opportunities there to restructure those programs to provide students with more direct support to help them, you know, again, accelerate their learning and to hopefully be more successful as we move forward. So we're going to take that as the opportunity to be able to make some of those changes to better support our at-risk students.
This is a public hearing. Do either of you have questions? You have to do the microphone, please, so we in the town can hear you.
I guess while we have you here, I guess, could you maybe explain a little further in detail what the 600,000 for out-of-district students refers to? So I guess I didn't understand really where that went in the presentation.
Yeah, so we, the way it works in Massachusetts, I think in every state, is if you're a student that's on an IEP, depending on what your developmental needs are, there's certain students that we can provide an adequate education to inside the Danvers Public Schools, inside the town of Danvers. So for those kids, we send them to an out-of-district placement, which is essentially, it could be a collaborative, it could be a private school, it could be a different public school, where they can better support their educational needs. So in this year, for FY23, for our next year, we're gonna have 5 additional students that moved into Danvers that didn't live here prior, that require or are already in a placement like that, resulting in basically a private school or a semi-public school sends us an invoice for those educational services. That results in a $600,000 increase for next year. Does that?
Sure.
Is that
Sure,
help?
no, that just cleared it up.
Okay.
That just wasn't necessarily clear to me, but no, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The only additional comment I'd make is we're always trying to, the goal would be to keep as many students in district as you can by developing programs, but sometimes you have a student with such a specific need, you really aren't going to develop an entire program around one student. That becomes not particularly cost effective either. So at the end of the day, it's about doing what's right for the individual student. We have, in the past several years, had some success building additional programs in district when we can get a critical mass and do the program right. So it's something we try and look at every year. So, any other public questions or comments? Are you good? Okay.
If I can just add
Thank
one-
you for hanging in there, by the way. Okay.
If I can just add one last piece, the budget is available online for anybody that would like to view it, download it, look at it. And I meant to start with this, but I would like to thank Pam Crum in my office, who really did so much of the work this year to pull the details together. So I am eternally grateful for all of her support for this budget this year. So thank you to her.
I take it you are not asking us to vote on this tonight because of the changes that could happen between now and March, is that correct?
Correct, and we always vote the budget in
We do,
March.
but I just
at
want to
their
make
next
sure
meeting.
that, yep.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, school committee. Thank you, audience. Now let's move to unfinished business and put the pedal to the metal. Holton Richmond Program of Studies for a second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, carries. Danvers High School Program of Studies for a second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, carries. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about any particular item?
I actually have a question about field
Sure.
trips. I'm sorry. Do you mind
No,
if I ask that
don't
question?
apologize, no.
Sorry, I know we're so close to the end. I know that there are some like rite of passage field trips for the middle school and the high school, Keith, and I'm just curious, is there an update on the status of, like, I think like the 8th graders go to DC, the 6th graders do something. I think there's a DC trip planned for the high school. I'm just wondering if we had an update on those field trips and whether or not they would be taking place.
So the 6th grade field trip typically happens in the fall, I believe, and that took place at Holton Richmond this year, so we're able to have that environmental program come to us. With the way that the timing has played out with the pandemic, the 8th grade field trip to DC was postponed like it was last year, so we'll reevaluate that for next year. And the trip to DC for the high school is for I guess is for the band and the chorus, and it was the alternative to Hawaii as an alternative. That was a bus-based trip, and the planning for that started much later than the planning timeline that's required for the 8th grade trip. So those planning timelines happen very differently.
Is there thoughts on making up for particularly, I guess it'd be the 8th graders, because they've missed out on quite a bit, for next year, or any kind of, I don't know, I just feel like kids in our districts look forward to these events and these celebrations of sorts, and they've lost it over the last couple of years. So just wondering if there's been any thought about
and we
making it
can,
up to them.
right, we can talk to Mr. Norton about that, about what it looks like for 8th graders this
Okay.
year. I know for last year, we did kind of an 8th grade celebratory week
Yeah.
in Danvers, even though we didn't go to DC, so to try to make it full of fun-based activities, and I just can't speak to that at this
Okay,
moment, or
that's
what it
fine.
looks like for this year, but I'm sure that we are, or if we haven't, we will.
Yeah.
Be planning that
It's only
for the
February.
8th graders this year, exactly, right? So all of those local-based trips, we still have plenty of time to do.
Okay.
Thank you, Alice. Are there additional questions on any item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, none, carries. Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve and release the minute from the January 24th, 2022 regular meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, none, carries. Thank you. Communications, Keith?
So for the consortium, we'll be starting our budget process this month, actually on Wednesday, and then hopefully be reporting again in March about an update to the budget.
Thank you. Legislation, Joan Lovely, our state senator, will be coming to our March meeting. She was going to come tonight, but given that we had quite an agenda, we decided March would be better. Subcommittee liaison updates, curriculum and assessment, anything to report?
Nothing to report from this past month.
All right. Equity.
Same with equity.
Yep. Same thing. Okay, is the policy committee, no, policy committee has not.
Policy, though, will be meeting in March to look at financial policies that have been revamped by MASC, school calendar for next year, and our school lunch policy that also just had a recent update.
Excellent.
So policy will be busy in March.
All right,
Good.
deep.
I have heard from Mary Beth. She wants me to let everybody know that the 13th annual DEEP HRMS Spelling Bee was held last Wednesday night at DHS. 45 students participated. The winner was Kaylee Allen, who went through, survived, as she says, 24 rounds to win the spelling bee, and she now moves on for a chance to qualify to compete in the regional spelling bee later this spring. So good job, Kaylee. The Deep Wine and Food Tasting has been rescheduled to October 27th, 2022, that's this year. Due to the rapidly changing, this is what Mary Beth says, due to the rapidly changing conditions and staff illness issues due to COVID, it was decided to move it to the fall, which is where it always was, I think, anyway. So this month's DEEP meeting will be taking place Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. at Brookline Bank on High Street in Danvers. Everybody is welcome, and that's it.
Thank you. Danvers Cares.
Okay, so the two big things is Light the Night Purple. They're hoping to bring her back in the spring, so it'll be taking place on a Wednesday. They're definitely looking for volunteers, so you should reach out to Andy St. Pierre if you want to help with that. And the other really big thing is, I know we had talked a couple months ago that we did get a grant through Boston Bridges, and it looks like we are going to have a healing and unity experience, which is going to be an event where we can reflect over the past year and celebrate everything that has been done to bring people together. Again, it's not decided when or where, but again, it'll be partnership with the Human Rights Committee, but again, we're looking for people to participate and volunteer in a committee to help plan the event.
Excellent. CPAC, anything to report?
No.
Okay.
No update on CPAC.
Do we know when their next meeting is, or?
I thought it was in February, but I didn't get a notification.
I'm sorry.
She wasn't sure.
We're just checking.
And I'm honestly blocked from Facebook, which is my
Okay.
go-to resources, the Danvers CPAC page.
There you
And
go.
Mr. Sullivan, our tech director, has me blocked from Facebook. It's not an educational site, so I apologize.
Guess we know who we can trust on Facebook. Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. There's a joint project happening. Am I correct about that? And there was a meeting, I want to say, this week about that as well, right?
Yes, that was the Health and Unity event that Robin was speaking of, so that's going to be a joint effort between
Excellent.
The Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. And I think Lynn is texting us on CPAC. Hold on.
That's great for Danvers Cares.
It's not on
and
the Facebook page.
So CPAC is having a
Inclusion.
planning meeting this week with the Director of Student Services about what our next event will be.
Excellent.
We have at least one viewer at home.
And we have a budget report.
We do, so the January budget report is attached. It is the same as last month.
Personnel, you have provided that to us, so we're good there. All right, and believe it or not, we've made it through this entire agenda. Let's see, I know Diane always tells me the next meeting, which is March 14th. I'm going to leave the public hearing on the budget open in case somebody has questions that day, so we'll leave that open. And unless anyone on the committee has anything else to add or contribute, we can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you, and good night, Danvers.